I want. This is after I'm recording a podcast after a long time. I just The reason that I came now was to discuss about this movie named Sinners that I saw like day before yesterday. Uh, because it hit me very strongly that it took me for some time to think about the movie. It's not it is not what it appears on the surface level. Mm, For example, the Si- the Sinners movie, it's on the surface level, it's a vampire movie, which works pretty well. Means as a vampire movie, it works pretty well. Underneath it, there was a lot of sub themes where it explores for a- uh, how this cultural appropriation, or like, for example, the projection through which you see a culture will change the perspective in which you understand that culture. For example, in the movie itself, it starts with how music is used to connect between, like, it transcends everything. It transcends life. And now, if you see the what you call the ideas that different kind of people put in that movie. For example, the Sammy, the character that is a great musician and who loves the music and wants to play the music. There, he's on the one side of the argument, whereas in the other side, you see Sammy's father, who is a church father, who wa- who wants to use this music for the praise of Lord. So what he says was the music. He accepts that the music is a talent, but his thing was that music for the purpose of humans is a uh, like it adds in the destruction of their what you call personality. For example, in him, a perfect human being is the one who serves God. But Sam uses his musics to serve drunkards, basically, in his view. So he thinks that he is doing this. Now there is another perspective, the vampire's perspective. The thing that I like about this movie was it doesn't take vampires as this kind of evil creatures that want to just destroy things. The vampires thinks that their way of living, means the way they live in the night, is superior way in which, when compared to the way that a common person live, which is the same understanding of the father also. He thinks that his way of living is a superior way of living. That's why he asked Sammy to be, means to serve God through his music. That is why the vampires also ask Sammy, because they want that knowledge of the music, because the vampires doesn't have that knowledge. They want Sammy to be a vampire so that 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 value, that the talent that he has will be used in serving to the higher purpose. So the director doesn't, not just putting vampires against humans, he's putting like different world perspectives against each other. One was a vampire kind of perspective, which is no different from Father Sammy's perspective, where they both thinks that think that there is something magical about the music, but they want the music to be directed in their hierarchy of the value. For example, what I'm saying was the father thinks that hierarchy is serving God. The vampires think that the hierarchy is serving themselves, is the vampire society. It, this is one of the theme of the movie. There is another theme where it explores the life of Jim Crow, which I think it was one of the best representation of the Jim Crow, because like in most movies you will see only the oppression perspective or war. For example, the movies on the American Civil War and this stuff. Whereas here they actually showed the soul of the society, means what they enjoy. what they want to means how music is integrated in their society. Even in the initial stages, means when the movie starts, they say that how music is not just something that is just to entertain the masses, but it is something that is used to connect to the ancestors as well. That you will see in the protagonists, both the protagonists' perspective. One was Elijah and Elihu. I think the Elijah is the Jewish prophet in the ninth century. Means he is the spiritual being. That's why he is very stoic. Means he doesn't express themselves. He is just a man on the duty. Whereas Elihu is the same name of Elijah in Greek. So there in Western civilization, there is two parts to a civilization. There is the Jerusalem part consists of the spirit of the civilization, whereas the Greek part consists means represents the means logical thinking of the civilization. That's means earthly things of the civilization. Means you understand, right? Earthly pleasures of the civilization. That's why you see um, I think it was smooth and stack is always an earthly kind of man, the man who runs for earthly pleasures. Whereas smoke is a spiritual kind of man, where he always wants to perform his duty more than what he likes. Whereas Stack always wants to pursue the earthly pleasure. That's why in the interval, Stack turns into a vampire because the vampires offer him an endless life. Means Stack think that that is the way, means that is a superior way of living. Stack accepts it, whereas Smooth does not. Smooth thinks that there is a, the way that they are living is a much fulfilling way. This it works on that level as well, and the means there are so many themes that this movie explores. I think this is probably one of the best vampire movies that came in almost a decade. I mean, the last best vampire movie was Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. That was really, really, really good movie. And after that, like I never, I always thought like vampire movies are fun, but this movie is something else. Like it doesn't tell about just about vampires. It tells about how certain cultures, with certain kind of invasive cultures, will appropriate mm, the cultures that they made. For example, the Britishers, when they invaded India, means when they conquered India, they, they have a set of value. Means these the race relations between the countries or the race relations between the humans, how different races of people see each other. Whereas if you come to India, a Bengali and a person from Tamil Nadu looks completely different. Like they look like different races, but they are same people. They can connect with each other. They can understand each other and they can relate with each other. The British mind cannot comprehend how, from his eyes, two different races can have a communication with no friction at all, which is which is incomprehensible to his mind. So he tries to create divide. He says that this guy is this way, or like he tries to create divide. The divide and rule policy is doesn't come from his what do you call uh, the divide and rule policy of the Britishers is not a necessity of British rule. It is a product of British mind. What I'm trying to say was the British has a philosophy or a thought process about how humans should interact, how humans should interact, how different race of humans should interact. He see a contradiction in India and he tries to create a divide in order to make sure that in order to prove that his way of thinking is correct. For example, that is now what the Britisher is doing is putting a lens on the actual object and making us see us through that lens. So we are not seeing the real object. We are seeing the object through the lens and we understand it in a very different way. I'll tell you another example. Now, most of the Indians know that sati is practiced in India, and sati is such a dangerous thing that I accept. Like sati is a horrible practice, but India, the entire Indian population or the entire Indian diversity is equivalent to Europe. I'm not talking about British or England. I'm talking about Europe. The entire Europe's diversity is equivalent to India's diversity in every aspect about the diversity or the population and the economy it generates during that time. The maximum number of recorded city cases in entire India is 3,000 and mostly comes from Bengal, Rajasthan. Now, take that equivalent in Europe, the witch burnings. Now, I can show you in a single town where 30 plus women are burned because of the witches. During the same period of time, during the same 16th and 7th, 16th, 17th, 18th century, there are order of magnitude more women burned because the people perceived them as witches than sati was practiced in India. Now, whenever sati was mentioned, we always take back, telling that, okay, this is a bad practice. We used to be that. But we never question the Englishman telling that witchcrafts are an order of magnitude much worse. Means you can't even compare sati to the witchcraft burnings because he imbibed in our brain that his way of thinking is superior. Now, the reason that I'm telling this was this is exactly how the vampires think of humans. Now, what the vampire thinking is we live forever. Now, telling the vampire's perspective that they live forever. So they have more knowledge about the world. Now, why the humans want to be humans? Why they want to die? It's just you give up seeing the sun, you can live forever. That's what the vampires are offering, and you have this ultimate strength and these powers and that powers. That metaphysically it makes sense in the movie. Now, why are humans are not converting into vampires? Now, logically, the vampire argument was correct. A man who pursues pleasure will always think that the vampire's way of living is much superior to a human way of living. Just the way the man who reasons through technology, or who thinks that who thinks the human relationship through power, thinks that the British were always superior to Indians. You understand, right? Means it, it is the lens in which the Britishers means we are seeing the world through the lens in which the Britishers put on us. We we see that way and we think that we are inferior. We think that sati is such an evil practice. Yes, sati individual case, sati is a very evil practice. But Indian society doesn't allow that in a huge scale. Whereas the British society allowed it. But we will not question the Britishers because we are seeing it through the lens of the Britishers. In through the lens of the Britishers, only sati looks very bad, not the witchcrafts. I'll tell you another good example. There is a word named Juggernaut in English, means something that moves and crushes everything in its path. The philology means the origin of that word comes from Lord Jagannath in Puri. Now, why that word origin? Because like when Jagannatha Ratham was pulled, the Britishers saw some person getting crushed um, under the wheels. Now he added this means it came into the British lexicography. This word Jagannath, which later slowly transformed into Jagannath. Now, try to explain to a Britisher what Lord Jagannath is. We see Lord Jagannath as God. We see him as something we aspire to. But when we try to explain it to the English, he always get this word Juggernaut, right? So whenever we are explaining it to the Britishers, he always thinks that we are explaining something about the day. We are explaining something bad to him, or we are drawing him into something evil, which is not the actual thing. But because the lens was put on him in such a way, that's why he perceives that in that manner. Just like the vampires thing, they perceive that in that manner because they are seeing through that lens. Similarly, Sammy's fathers perceive Sammy's music in a different way because of his lens. Now you see a lot of what you call these in like this kind of invasive cultures coming into other culture and appropriating their culture and later claiming that it is their own culture. Mm, how the for example, music. As was said in the music, music is a very, very, very pagan thing. It has nothing to do with Abrahamic religions. Most of the music that you see when Abrahamic religions were started, there were almost no good music ever came from Abrahamic religion. Every music that came is appropriated by the Abrahamic religion, then it became great. For example, the Sufi saints in India. Entire music comes from Hinduism or the Hindu way of life. Uh, so yeah. Mm. Yeah, it explores a lot of things like I'm still trying to understand like what different like there are so many things like even the vampires accepts that in one of the dialogue he accepts that it is a superior way of living, means the human way of living is superior way of living, but they have no choice but to make them into vampires. it's it's very, it's philosophically it was so true. Like if you remove vampires and put some other group, it makes a lot of sense. For example, I even have an experience where, like when we are eating biryani, I see a person eating biryani with a spoon. We are eating with hand. That's the way you should eat biryani. You should never eat biryani with a spoon. That's crazy. But that that the person who is eating with a spoon got so offended. Why are you making your hands very dirty by eating with hand and stuff? And that time I didn't have anything to counter her also, telling that no, no, this is the way you should be living. Because we are trained, because the lens was put on us in such a way that we cannot even tell to a person this is how you should be doing this, not the other way. We can't even be confident about ourselves. It's it's something scary because that movie is scary because not because it shows vampires, because it shows how much we are in love with the vampires, means the vampire kind of ideology, means how much we are in agreement with the vampire kind of ideology, how we cannot derive the value from our own way of life, and we always look upon something alien for validation. It's it's much more complex than what I thought. uh, uh, it's not just a simple vampire story that I can tell you. It wants to tell a lot more. Maybe I need a second watching of the movie to understand like what themes it explores. But I'm pretty sure this is going to be one of the best movie of this year. I mean, means I was not so much moved by them by a movie. It's been so long. The last movie that I thought like excellent was Me Aragan, it's a travel movie. Now I didn't make a movie about Me Aragan. I didn't make a talk about Me Aragan because it is it is more of a feeling how we feel about the movie. Sinners is something on your face. You cannot escape from what it is trying to present to you. Mm. Yeah, I'm thinking Sinners is more of an Indian movie rather than American movie because it explores the Indian kind of thinking more than what the Americans used to. Means uh, we can relate, the Indians can relate it even more than what Americans can relate it to because I see this kind of homogeneity in Indian society. Uh, Maybe I am diverging from the actual topic here. And this is my uh, talk on the movie Sinners. I think I didn't put it everything, but this is just an initial phase. I'll make it a much more elaborate podcast once I gone through the multiple screenings of the movie. Uh, yeah, when it's come to OTT, I'm going to see it again. Uh, it is a scary movie, not because it's a vampire movie. It is a scary movie because it shows us how much we relate with the vampires, how much we are not humans, how much the human part in us is removed, how much this vampire kind of thinking has came to us. Uh, I think with this, I'm going to end. Hope I'll record even more about the movies. I think I'll record more frequently about my thoughts and everything. Yeah, thank you.